What I'm going to cover in this particular tutorial is how we get Lua support into our game. Now this comes in two flavors, or there's two polarities if you like, to this issue of getting Lua integrated. Obviously up front we've got to get the actual Lua interpreter compiled in and embedded into our game. But one side of it is running the Lua interpreter, and what we really want to do there is have a system where at the beginning of the game we're going to be loading up all of the Lua functionality, setting up the state, and generally making the interpreter available for use throughout the game. For the purposes of this game demonstration, what I'm going to do is simply launch a configuration script, which can be very handy in itself. We can put some text-based configuration options right into a Lua file and interpret those at game startup time. But you can obviously provide, a complete game loop support for Lua. Now the flip side, the other polarity really is, okay, you've got your Lua script open in your text editor or your your game asset. How can you call back from Lua into your game? So this is the idea of adding an API to your game where your game is actually exposed to Lua as a library, if you like. And obviously, World of Warcraft, this sort of thing, they've got a very extensive API. We're going to provide just a very basic sort of an API, and you'll see how that happens. When you mention the word API, you're going to think, well, hang on, I've got hundreds, thousands of function signatures in my my game. What a lot of work it's going to be to actually code up this API to provide Lua support. Well, the reality is that there's only a very small number of those functions that you really need to provide access to. And I just want to mention that there are out there quite a few frameworks that promise a complete sort of Lua integration at the press of a button. And the idea here is that you point some kind of special integration system at your code, and this is going to scan through your code and produce a set of Lua API bindings. There's a number of issues with this approach, and I think maybe it's valid if you've got, say, some kind of generic library and asset loading library or something like that, and you want to provide a binding. If that library is already got a nice clean API, and you'd want to expose that as something that can be used as functionality via Lua, well, hey, yeah, those binding systems make sense. But inside your game, you probably don't have a clean subset of API calls that are just exactly the ones that you want to expose to your Lua interpreter. If you ask yourself the question, all right, let's say I have someone doing level design for me, what API calls do I need to have them using, and what ones do I not want them to have access to? I mean, if there's some function that you've written to save your game data out to a writable document directory, that's not necessarily something that you want the Lua API to be doing, right? That's probably the job of the binary save function when somebody presses the save button in your game. So it's sort of tempting to say, hey, I'll just get around this whole Lua integration by adding a push button thing where I bind everything. Well, I'm going to show you an approach where we pick and choose and we create our own special Lua API without using any of these magic systems, and it's going to give us the benefit of simplicity Alright, there's a bit of a watershed to get over once you sort of look at how we write the boilerplate to get Lua happening. But once you master that boilerplate, you can basically rinse and repeat to get the exact effect you need with your Lua code, and you'll see what I mean. All of the bindings follow the same sort of pattern, and being able to just bind the functions you want gives you something very small, very fast, very clean, and it also means that you're only binding the functions that you really need. What I've done is chosen out a case study, and I've based it off of a really excellent tutorial by Victor Lidholt, and I'll point you how to get to Victor's tutorial. It's called Cocos Dragon, and what I've done is I've taken that Cocos tutorial and actually made it update onto the iPad, and you'll see that, so those symbols on the right there, the one with a hammer is actually Cocos Builder, and you'll see how I've updated it for iPad using Cocos Builder, and then I've added a number of tweaks. The original Cocos Dragon tutorial had pretty simple challenges in that the bombs, which are your monsters that are trying to kill your little dragon character, those bombs are very simple. So what my scripting source does is actually gives those intelligence, and I've created two types of bombs by applying different scripts to them, and you'll see how that works as I press on in this case study. So I used scripting in my own game, FX 2080, and it's very powerful in that case. My game's an adventure game, but I didn't want to go and make something that wasn't going to be available to the public. So what I've done is I've put my little potted case study built on top of Victor's code, which is already in the BSD licensing sort of framework, and I've taken my stuff and just put it in the public domain on top of that. So just check the GitHub project for the licensing and the availability of all of this stuff, and feel free to go help yourself to that so you can follow through on this case study. Alright, so time for some coding.